Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wearing a designer gown emblazoned with the words, "Tax the rich."
Photos emerged showing the governor unmasked and in close quarters with a large group.
Nancy Pelosi is under fire after surveillance video shows her at a hair salon getting a blowout and not wearing a face mask.
Hypocrisy.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz jetting off to Cancun during an unprecedented crisis in his state.
Privilege for me, but not for thee.
Hey, dirt people, give up your cars, heat sources, and steel buildings while we wait in the lounge sipping Cristal as the G6 gets gassed up.
Few things are more frustrating to working class Americans than one set of rules for elites and another for everyone else.
Climate change is real.
Here's U.S. Senator and climate crusader Elizabeth Warren making headlines in 2020 after exiting a private jet and apparently ducking behind a staffer to avoid the cameras. And here's climate czar John Kerry, who lectures the public on putting an end to fossil fuels, while it's been reported his family private jet released 300 metric tons of carbon since Biden took office.
It's the only choice for somebody like me who is traveling the world to win this battle.
Nothing riles up the electorate like politicians who don't practice what they preach.
Their faces are open, they get to smile for all of the cameras, and all of the working class people serving them have to be faceless, They are masked.
No, I just have my hair washed. I don't wear a mask when I'm washing my hair. Do you wear a mask when you're washing your hair?
As I said, really from the moment I sat on the plane, I began really second guessing that decision.
But what about central bankers? Federal Reserve Bank presidents are not elected officials, which is perhaps why San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly wasn't concerned with how tone-deaf her recent comments on inflation came off.
You know, I have to say that I don't get the pain of inflation anymore, but I don't find myself in a space where I have to make trade-offs because I have enough. Many, many Americans have enough.
She sold all 70 stocks they owned December 28th of 21. It's literally a few days before the top. These are people that are voting for programs that cause asset price inflation while they own these assets.
But what about the rest of America? Let them eat cake? Well, according to a Bloomberg op-ed, let them eat lentils to beat inflation.
We just got to restock the ice cream right for Easter Sunday because we were, shall we say, enjoying chocolate, and then we have some other chocolate here.
From central bankers to House speakers to state governors, hypocrisy among those in power seems to have become more shameless since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only are they breaking their own rules, but they're telling us the negative impacts of their policies could actually be good for us.
The more we see of the just rank hypocrisy of these standard bearers of this particular worldview, I think it just hastens the return to sanity.
As the concentration of power grows, it further separates Washington insiders from the reality of everyday working life. And one of the biggest contributors to this is a system of manipulated money.
In much of the Western world, we have so much price propaganda, and it's driven by who barons declare the winner of the U.S. election, which is the Fed and all the other central banks around the world, just printing money and creating a quintillionaire class.
The Cantillon effect is the phenomenon that describes how those closest to the Fed's money printer benefit to a greater extent than those further away, and how political incentives become less and less about accountability and more about re-elections than anything else. And when the money printer goes burr, it perpetuates and compounds wealth inequality. It benefits corporate executives who are able to use easy money for stock buybacks, and ultimately benefits short-term focused politicians.
So people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are in this lovely situation of paying less in taxes as a share of their income than the poor people who live in that same state. I think people aren't living their values.
If people are no better than their incentives, and the actual supply of money can be changed by a small group of unelected fiat overlords who stand to benefit from such a change, do the math. It's no surprise they might want to keep the current system as is. And then consider Bitcoin, a system of rules with no rulers. If no one has the ability to expand or manipulate the supply of money, then government officials would have to be more accountable to the promises they make and be held to a higher standard than when they're close to the monetary spigot. Maybe then societies could finally experience true financial inclusion and a chance to minimize the wealth gap.
Once these fiat dark ages end, and that's what we're witnessing right now. This is what you're seeing on the cable news. This is what you're seeing in the hysterics on Twitter. Once that dies, there's a great opportunity for the ordinary person to build something new.
Fiat has succeeded in keeping the majority of people working harder and harder for less and less. It continues to shortchange wage earners of their most precious resource, their time. But what will happen when people stand up and say no to the hypocrisy and the inequality a system of easy money has created?
If you keep the poor people divided, they can't wake up long enough to do what I did and read about how money works. Because if they do that, we got big trouble, right? Then the slaves will wake up. You don't want to deprogram the slaves. So you have to convince the slaves that it's not the monetary system's fault that you're broke. It's not the monetary system's fault that you continue to work for a set number of dollars and the price of houses just keep going up and up and up. It's not the monetary system's fault. It's the white man's fault, or the black man's fault, or the Asian people's fault. Someone else's fault. Because if the poor people all fight each other, they can't wake up long enough to look up and go, there's not actually that many of them.
We hope you enjoyed that report. Make sure that you like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any hard money content.
Thousands, the global financial system was in turmoil. Many people were losing faith in traditional financial institutions that for too long had made the rich richer at the expense of, well, everyone else.
Against this backdrop, a person or group named Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper in 2008 titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, describing a new form of money that for the first time did not require trust in a third party.
And on January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto mined the Genesis block, and Bitcoin was born.
14 years later, Bitcoin endured multiple attacks from within and out. It has been blamed for everything from climate change to money laundering and has been declared dead 467 times.
But Bitcoin survived.
And began to thrive.
It inspired Bitcoin communities all around the world. It brought together analysts, artists, environmentalists, developers, farmers, and more.
It was even adopted as legal tender.
But it doesn't belong to any government, any political party, or any ideology.
It doesn't care who you are or where you're from.
Or what you buy.
Bitcoin isn't about getting rich quickly.
It's about saving the value of your time and energy.
Bitcoin is just money, but unlike the money we have today, controlled by a group of bankers who make decisions behind closed doors, Bitcoin is governed by code that anyone can freely download and verify for themselves.
We once separated church and state. Bitcoin is how we separate money and state. Because the government shouldn't control what you believe in, and it shouldn't control your money either.
14 years ago, Bitcoin had one user. Today, it has millions.
14 years from now, what do you think?
I don't understand, how do you not believe in any conspiracy theories? I understand not all of them, not most of them, but you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? You just think the government's just batting 1,000 and telling us the whole truth? That's a strong stance to take. And again, as I said before, I don't like talking about politics on stage or off stage. I don't like talking about things I don't feel like I'm truly knowledgeable in. But I do know this. Our government is placed in charge of all of its people. I'm a father who's been placed in charge of just one son. And I lie to that all the time.
The March 2020 liquidity crisis, we had this huge round of money printing globally. The government, as a result of that, because when you're increasing the money supply, you're basically increasing the size of the state.
They were already mid-30s. Before this, they jumped to 43% overnight.
The end game here that I have in mind is like in Soviet Russia, where towards the end, 1 in 3 people worked for the government.
Correct.
They were basically all informants, so they're all just like telling on each other.
Yeah.
And they're all telling lies all the time because they're, whatever's in service to the state narrative, that's what was being propagated. So that's like the end game that I hope we can avoid, but we've definitely seen it empirically in the past. We're seeing the attacks on language already, in particular recession, which has a very bright definition and historically, right?
It's 80 years. It's multi-generational. So now we're going to change it today.
So is that a canary in the coal mine that we're attacking the definitions of words themselves to further create the confusion that gets people out of their critical thinking and into their animal instincts?
Yeah, no, gaslighting is a form of abuse. And gaslighting is something that, unless you're aware of it and can guard against it, it makes you question your sanity.
So there's going to be a moment, if Bitcoin continues to grow in its impact, when governments are going to seriously contend with, what do we do with this? Do you think about those moments? Is Bitcoin, is the cryptocurrency world in general going to be able to withstand the serious legal pushback from countries, from nations, especially authoritarian nations?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. It's been 12 years, okay? More than 12 years since Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin. And they haven't been able to stop it. They have tried. They have tried a lot. I wrote a long essay for Quillette on this. Like, why haven't governments been able to stop Bitcoin? And my thesis is essentially that there's been like this mix of different kind of technical, social, and economic and political incentives and disincentives that make it very difficult. And I think to me, the best way to think about it is that Bitcoin's like a Trojan horse. So just to actually tell that story just a little bit, because I think it's important to understand the classical mythology tale. I find this very interesting.
Of the actual
Trojan horse, yeah, which was told in the Aeneid, actually, by Virgil, right? And the idea was the Greeks had been like trying to take the city of Troy for like a decade at these like impregnable walls, and they couldn't do it. And Ulysses and the rest of the Greek army were like, we don't know what to do. So Minerva, the god of strategy and war, kind of like they get this idea from her, I guess, to actually try to use subterfuge and trickery to take over the city. So the idea is and this was sort of hatched by Ulysses, right, to put this horse together that would kind of be like a gift. So the idea was the Greeks just like pretended to leave, right? They deserted. They left behind one soldier and this horse. And the Trojans looked at it and they were like, what is going on here? And they brought in the soldier, and the soldier's like, look, they left. They're so sorry for all of the desecration and blood spill. This is their gift to you. It's, honoring Minerva. It's like this, trophy for you guys. Yeah. And there were actually people inside Troy, Cassandra, a prophet, as well as Laocoon, who was like a priest, who said, no, this is obviously a trick. This is obviously a trick. But they were like dispatched and ignored because the horse was like, it was just like so badass. So the Trojans were like, bringing it in the city. So they brought it in themselves. No blood spilled at all, right? In the middle of the night, of course, what you realize is the horse was packed with Greek soldiers, and they come out and they let the army in, which was like hiding behind an island. So this idea that like something could be so attractive that you really can't say no, even if you know what's inside of it, is at play in Bitcoin. So like in Bitcoin has this number go up technology, right? It is what we call it in sort of shorthand, NGU, right? But what people don't realize is that NGU is like the Trojan horse. Inside the Trojan horse is FGU, freedom go up technology. So dictators and rogue regimes and corporations are going to buy, mine, tax, accumulate this thing because it's the best performing financial asset in the world. What they don't realize, or they're going to have to ignore, is that they're also aiding and abetting this freedom technology, which allows individuals to be sovereign and eventually erodes their power. There's no question that rogue regimes and bad actors have already used and will continue to use Bitcoin. The thing is, when you think about a North Korea or a Venezuela, and that government instructs some of its bureaucrats and cronies and officials to start stealing Bitcoin or accumulating it or whatever, for short-term gain, to get around sanctions and use it to buy dollars or something like that, right? Which they can't get normally. Well, guess what? All those people who the regime has instructed to like figure this thing out and use it, they're all going to realize, oh my God, this is money the government doesn't control. And it's going to spread like a virus, okay? So this is like the idea of the Trojan horse allegory, why I think it's so important and powerful with Bitcoin. All the people talking about Bitcoin today on TV, they don't care about freedom or privacy. They just care about number go up. But what they don't realize is what's concealed within. And that's very, very powerful to me.
So the people talking about Bitcoin on TV are maybe investor types.
Professional investors, corporations, and soon governments. I mean, you just had today, this morning on CNBC, the leader of the Republican leader of the House of Representatives, a congressman, saying like we need to be pro-Bitcoin as a country. And the other day, Peter Thiel had a very interesting comment where he was basically like, let's not fall behind China in this race. So you have influential people in our government, like sort of posturing for this like, Bitcoin race that's going to happen in the next 10 years. You're going to see this. Countries are going to compete to stack Bitcoin. Absolutely.
So you believe the thing that's shiny and sexy, like the Trojan horse, the number go up.
It's too hard to ignore.
And to define that a little further, meaning is it does seem like the more people get excited and start using Bitcoin, the more of its value grows. So it's just a good
feedback loop.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop. And then the reason you're excited about it, especially, is the
freedom go up.
Freedom go up, which is it ultimately gives power to the individuals to decentralize.
Yeah, I mean, like
system.
When Tesla stacks Bitcoin, they're just doing that out of self-interest. They think it's going to be a good inflation hedge. Fine. But what they maybe don't care about, don't realize, or they don't need to care. I mean, Bitcoin's power is it like co-opts people into promoting a freedom tool, even if they don't care about, or even if they hate freedom. It doesn't matter. So when Tesla stacks Bitcoin and the price goes up and more interest goes up and more people around the world are like, wow, Bitcoin, then more people get involved. Again, more adoption, more price, more developers, better user interface, more privacy tools, more mining, more network security. It's just this like positive feedback loop that continues to grow, and it will grow intensely in the next decade as we go through the adoption cycle. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is the human rights world, again, to get back to our previous conversation, it is very hard to find people who have, the empathy or the altruism to actually make a difference abroad in places like China or Saudi Arabia or North Korea. People are very quick to they'll just quickly toss off the pretty words that they care about human rights as soon as profits come into play. So there's no alignment of incentives, right? The reason why Bitcoin is so powerful is that it aligns the incentives. All of a sudden, they can be as greedy as they want. They are being forced to promote a freedom tool. This I've never seen before, and it gives me a lot of like excitement. It's very refreshing because we've been laboring in the human rights space. You have to like raise money, and it's all like nonprofit work, and you're like begging for people to make a difference for you. Here you have this like incredible asset, which people will accumulate out of self-preservation, self-interest, and greed, and yet it will strengthen the power of the individual. That is what we need to fight Big Brother. That's what we need to fight. Like what I'm scared is happening in China, like this growing authoritarian state, which is powered by big data analysis. This is our way to fight back. And it runs on this like really interesting engine, again, that like takes advantage of our base nature as humans. And I know that it sounds terrible for me to say this, but I mean, ultimately we are self-interested, and it is hard to get people to care about others living 1,000 miles away. We are kind of localized in our empathy. Speaking as someone who works to help people who live in like 100 different countries, it's very difficult to get Americans to care about what's happening in Belarus or in Kashmir. It just is. But guess what? They're going to definitely care about Bitcoin because they want to see their net worth go up. They want to do better for their family, etc. They're going to get into this thing, and it's really going to like make that powerful tool for everyone else who's using it. So this interplay dynamic is fascinating to me.
Yeah, I have to. So I'm somebody who doesn't like the corrupting effects of greed, but it is also human nature.
Yeah, I don't like it either. But we have to be realists here.
You have to acknowledge it and then maybe use it for your advantage.
And it's not just Bitcoin itself. Like exchanges today are adopting something called Lightning Network, which is a way to scale Bitcoin on a second layer. Much like we had gold bars, which we scaled with paper money, and then we had Visa credit cards, which were a way of scaling the paper notes. Bitcoin scales through Lightning Network. It's a private, instant, globally final settlement network. It's something you all should check out. It's very, very interesting. The exchanges aren't adopting Lightning for its privacy benefits. Like Lightning operates off the chain, meaning surveillance companies can't do chain analysis on Lightning because it's on an onion routed second layer, that works kind of like the Tor project. The exchanges don't care about privacy. They're doing it because it reduces fees. Lightning is cheaper and faster. So again, we have this really interesting alignment of incentives where like the freedom tech is being promoted by people who it doesn't matter what their incentives are. I could care less if they were altruistic or not. And I think this is, and you're going to maybe see this even in the future. There's more things coming in Bitcoin down the pike. Lightning was enabled by an upgrade called SegWit, right, which took place a few years ago, which was the culmination of the block size conflict. Mm-hmm. There's another thing coming up called cross-input signature aggregation, which may, if it takes effect in the next few years, it may compel exchanges to collaboratively spend all their Bitcoin together in a way that really protects our privacy and fights surveillance. But they're not going to do it for moral reasons. They're going to do it because it's going to save them money and improve their bottom line.
Can you speak to that kind of collaborative so that you can have multiple parties in a single transaction kind of thing?
Yeah, like you can do that today. Absolutely. It's called a coin join, for example. But right now it's more expensive to coin join in Bitcoin. You have to pay a premium for your privacy. This would flip that on its head and would basically say, if you have one transaction, hey, pile them all in, have as many parties as you want. The more parties you get in, the cheaper it's going to be per party. Okay. And that's not possible in Bitcoin today, but it might be in the future. But again, the beauty in Bitcoin are these these ways that it just aligns human incentives and it aligns our most base desires and needs and realities with freedom and privacy. And that I've never seen before. And that's why I think it's so interesting.
Oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, have agreed to cut oil production by 2 million barrels a day.
When we see the OPEC Plus decision to be cutting oil, this is huge. And the reason it's such a big deal is because if OPEC is purposely reducing supply to keep those prices not only up, but maybe making new highs, I cannot even imagine what this means for the treasury market and for the prices in the treasury market. It has the potential to wreak havoc with OPEC Plus stepping in and trying to manipulate the energy input to literally all supply chains around the world. If you can't get inflation under control, well, you're not going to be able to get the prices of credit under control either.
Lowering costs for the American people, that's a priority. That's why the Inflation Reduction Act is so important.
I don't care what you say about inflation, but it's going to impact inflation and it's going to impact the credit markets and it's going to be chaotic, to say the least.
It's the barber shop here in Ozonte. We're gonna get a haircut and we're going to pay with Bitcoin. ¿Cuándo fue la primera vez, Lili, que usted escuchó sobre Bitcoin?
Quizás hace 2 años.
Aquí en el Ozonte. ¿Y lo empezó a ocupar desde ese momento que escuchó sobre Bitcoin?
No, tenía miedo.
¿Cuánto tiempo pasó desde que usted supo para empezar a ocuparlo?
Quizás como unos 6 meses, porque no sentía confianza.
Ok. ¿Qué beneficios ve usted?
Por ejemplo, yo tengo dinero en el banco, ¿verdad? Y allí a veces en el año lo más que me dan son $3 de ganancia, digamos. Y en esto yo he tenido ganancias de hasta $500, depende de lo que uno tenga, ¿verdad? Con eso hemos terminado de construir la casa.
Ah, qué chivo.
Ajá, entonces yo lo veo bastante favorable.
¿Cuánto le voy a cancelar? $2. ¿Con Bitcoin le puedo pagar? Va, con ese código. Sí. We're going to pay Lily $2. Ya está. Hiya, Satoshi.
What I think the US government needs to very, very seriously consider is both how Bitcoin's power can be harnessed and leveraged as a digital public utility, similar to the internet, for national security interests. This technology can't be uncreated. China and Russia will be using this in 1 to 5 to 10 to 100 years, whether we like it or not, and that's okay. But we need to think about it, and we need to think about it correctly and responsibly. And then I think we need to think about how the payments technology can fix material distortions in our country. And again, I could be wrong. I'm not giving advice. I'm clearly very biased and passionate. But just as an exercise as Americans, this is our duty to not only our country, but to the free world. You know, for payments, Bitcoin is already catalyzing optimization. I talked a little bit about my business. We all know Jack and Square are very big proponents. We all know former big tech executives like David Marcus are now in the industry. This technology is being validated and changing lives already. And I think with time will change everyone's life. And by the way, including the way fiat currency moves. So again, I can explain this later. It wasn't worth this presentation, but my company, for example, amongst many others, moves US dollars on top of this. So this is not anti-dollar. This is not opposing the Federal Reserve. This is superior technology. It's a public utility that can be used for whatever someone wants to use it for, just like the internet. The United States has to harness this tech, or at the very least, give it an honest look. Can't reject it, because the genie's out of the bottle, and it's not coming back in. So my last slide, as the leader of the free world, the United States is in the best position to demonstrate commitment to exploring this new idea. It's who we are as a country, and again, we don't owe it to our neighbors, but we owe it to the free world at large. We are the world leader in democracy and for human freedom. And this is a new public utility for money, just like the internet is for information. And as a country, we need to be leaders. And I feel as if we've struggled with that at times, and it's okay, this stuff is new. But with this framework of thought, I think we can make a lot of progress because we're the best country in the world. So if you need to reach me, this is my email, and I appreciate you guys giving me the time.
I love hearing from entrepreneurs. I mean, I think it's so important that we actually really listen to these messages. We want to build in the US, we want to stay here, but this is a global industry, globally competitive. Talent moves around, mining moves around. If we want to have the best and brightest, if we want to have the best energy infrastructure in the world, the best payments infrastructure in the world, I think we really, really need to take this seriously, especially as things move so quickly in like times of chaos, right? So this is, to me, a very uniting technology that can bring the left and right and center and everything else back together. It's much bigger than, bigger than this. We have to remember that this is so revolutionary, that these technologies, these pieces of technologies that have been brought together, so digital money, the ability to be truly decentralized, the ability to balance the grid as we build out different infrastructure, in mining, the difficulty adjustment, all of these pieces come together to create this amazing symphony, right? It's not like we're building, you can compare fiat to maybe Nickelback, right? And compare Bitcoin to Beethoven. So, sorry, Nickelback, but that's kind of how I see it. And I think how a lot of folks around the world see it when they're having to pay, 10% remittance fees. So this is huge for the United States and for the world, for us to progress, as a species. And this is really about humanity. And the U.S. has always been a leader in this, and so we must continue to do that.